Hello all my lovelies, and I'm Fergus here, and I'm back with Monday's writing video. So some of you may be wondering why I only uploaded 4 the 100 subscriber special week when I said I was going to upload 7. Well, the thing is, it didn't seem like you guys really enjoyed them besides the makeup one. And another thing is, I really haven't gotten the chance to do the other challenges because I've been so busy with finals coming up and a bunch of other things that are happening. So it's a mixture of those two things that it doesn't seem like people have been enjoying them and all that stuff. Notifications. But I noticed one video that did get a lot of attention and a lot of likes was me reading out some Clans fanfiction I wrote. So I was thinking, for today, how about I share some more Clans fanfiction? Well, it's not Clans, but it's Shiclance. I don't know how to say the ship name. Basically, it's Shiro, Heath, and Lance. And this is set in the Omegaverse. So, Beta, Alpha, and Omega dynamics and all that jazz. And also, for those of you who have... Spoiler warning for those of you who haven't watched past episode or season 2, you might want to click away now. Anyway, with all that going on and the fact that Pride Month has started and on the 15th, 11 more days, we're gonna get season 6 of Voltron. So the stars are aligning for me to do this, to read out my fanfiction that's been gaining a lot of popularity lately, especially on Archive of Our Own, My True Self. So, yeah, this is set Omegaverse. This is set No Lion Switch. You would get that if you watch past season 2. So if you haven't watched past season 2, again, watch all of it before you listen to this. So, yeah. I hope you guys enjoy this, and here we go. Chapter 1. Another day, another fight with the Galra. Lance, along with his 2 alphas, had been resting in their nests, made by Lance, in their room when the alarms went off. Lance groaned and snuggled into Shiro, who chuckled at the Omega. "I don't want to go," Lance whined. Shiro kissed his forehead. "You know we have to." Lance turned to whine at Heath, but the smaller alpha was already out of bed and getting suited up. Lance groaned. "Fine, but I expect extra cuddles when we get back." Heath and Shiro chuckled. Soon all of them were suited up and off to the bridge. The other 2 paladins were already there with Allura and Karan. "There you 3 are! Lotor, along with several all fleets, are approaching the ship. Get to your lines and prepare to battle." Allura started prepping the castle's defenses and all weapons. The paladins traveled to their respective lines, then flew out into space, ready to face the opposing threat. It didn't take long for Lotor and his fleet to arrive. Instantly, the paladins were thrown into a fighting frenzy. Hunk slammed his lion into the smaller ships, barreling through them while also destroying them with his lion's mouth. Pitch flew quickly around the ships, using her cloaking to an advantage to surprise ships as she blasted them. Shiro used his jaw blade to slice through the ships, turning them into fiery infernos. Heath used his lion's speed to his advantage as he flew past ships, clawing and shooting them as he went. Lance stuck to shooting the ships, but was having a little trouble. He soon realized that most of the ships were aiming toward him. Guys, is it just me, or are most of the ships after me?" Lance asked over the comm unit. After he heard some typing, then Karan spoke. "Lance is right. A majority of the ships are aiming towards the Blue Lion." "Why would they be aiming for Lance?" Pidge asked as she shot some more ships. Before any of them could reply, a face appeared on their screens, but it wasn't an ally. "Hello, Paladins," Lotor smirked. "I know you are busy with fighting some of my army, but I have a proposition for you. Give me the dark-skinned and blue-eyed beauty, and I'll call off my army." "We'll never let you lay a hand on the princess," Lance yelled. Lotor chuckled. "I don't want the princess. I want you, Blue Paladin." Everyone froze. "Lance? Why do you want Lance?" Pidge asked. Lotor grinned. I have many reasons, but I will say I've grown fond of the Blue Paladin. Heath, and even Shiro growled. We'll never let you have him, Heath yelled. Lance was his mate. He would be damned if he would let anyone lay a hand on him. Besides Shiro, that is. Lotor tisk. I will have what I want. I gave you your chance, but it looks like I'll have to use other means. The prince disappeared from view. Don't worry, Lance, he's not taking you, Shiro reassured. He'd be damned if one of his mates was taken from him. Yeah, he'll have to get through us, Heath growled. Lance nodded. I'm not planning on going anywhere without a fight. He winked, trying to hide the fact that he was really freaking out. If it weren't for the fact that they were all in their lines, they would be able to smell the salty and seaweed smell Lance was producing. Just then, more ships appeared, including several battle cruisers. Quiznak! Pidge swore. The Paladins continued fighting, unable to group up to form Voltron. Instead of the Galra attacking Lance, though, they all focused on the other Paladins, almost avoiding the Blue Paladin. Lance was so concentrating on trying to get into battle, he failed to notice the ship sinking up behind him. Blue let out a cry to alert Lance, but all he could do was turn around before he was blasted by an ion cannon. Lance cried out as he was thrown from his chair and Blue went offline. He was surprised, and extremely grateful, that Blue was still in one piece. Lance? Lance! Heath faintly heard the others calling to him, Keith and Shiro especially. It was all he could do to stay conscious, though, as a small stream of blood fell from his head. Suddenly, Blue was moving, as if being pulled by a giant magnet. Lance put all of his strength into sitting up and crawled to his chair. A few seconds later, Blue came back online, and with a picture of Lotor on screen. Hello, Blue Paladin. I apologize for the rough ride, but it will be over soon. And don't worry about your team. My army is keeping them busy. I'll be there to greet you once we reach another galaxy. The screen disappeared and Lance was left in silence. Lance wasted no time trying to contact the others. Keith? Shiro? Is anyone there? No answer. Alora? Coran? Still no answer. Pidge? Hunk? But it was still met with silence. Blue? He weakly called out. Lance sighed in relief when he felt Blue's presence in his hand. Ahead. We'll get out of this mess somehow. Blue purred, sending calming images to his head, helping him relax. Lance took off his helmet and ran a hand through his hair. When he pulled his hand back, there was blood. Shoot, I should bandage this. He slowly got up and went back to the first aid kit he kept in Blue and pulled out some gauze. He wrapped it around his head, making it as tight as he could without cutting off circulation. Not the best, but I'll have to do for now, he muttered. Lance felt Blue jerk forward, and then was still again. He took a deep breath, then relaxed and looked through Blue's eyes. He could see that they were floating in space still, and there was no one else around besides the ship above him that held Blue in a beam of light. Quiznak, we must have warped, Lance muttered. He pulled his helmet back on and tried to contact someone again, but all there was static. Lance groaned and sat back in his seat. Looks like it's just me and you, Blue. As soon as Lance said that, he felt Blue start to move up, and he looked back through his lion's eyes, and saw that they were being pulled into the ship. Gosh dang it! When they were completely in the ship, Blue was still in the beam when the doors opened, and two figures walked into the room. Lance kept watching them through Blue, fearing that if he stopped for a second, something bad would happen. The figures stopped right in front of Blue, revealing themselves to be Lotor and Hagar. Chapter 2. Lance was glad he was in Blue because he did not want to be anywhere near the two Galra. He watched as the two tried to touch Blue, but luckily she could still put her shield up. They seemed frustrated with that. Good, Lance thought. At least they can't try to get in. The two seemed to argue about something before Hagar pointed at the lion. Lance paled when he noticed purple lightning sparking from her hand before it shot at Blue. His connection Blue was suddenly cut off, which caused Lance to jerk back. The Cuban realized in horror that Blue had shut down. Lance swore to himself and looked for somewhere to hide. Realizing that he had nowhere to hide, he summoned his Bayard and aimed at where they would enter. They had another thing coming if they thought he would go quietly. He could hear them as they entered into Blue and made their way to the cockpit. Lance counted down in his mind till they would get there. Finally, the footsteps stopped, and someone entered the cockpit. Lance wasted no time in trying to shoot them down, but they had activated their shield. Based off that alone, he knew it was Lotor. He kept firing at the shield, hoping to damage it enough that it deactivated. It was when he felt a presence behind him that he remembered Hagar could teleport. Lance fell forward, paralyzed, as Hagar used her magic on him. He could see Lotor deactivate his shield and stand out of the corner of his eye. Just what I expect from the Blue Paladin. Lotor walked over and crouched down beside Lance. You're an excellent fighter. And, by the smell of you, you're an Omega. You're just what I need for a mate. I already have 2 wonderful mates that you could not even start to compare to. Lance was happy to find he could still talk even though his body was paralyzed. Lotor chuckled. I will change your mind eventually. Till then, Hagar will run some non-lethal tests on you. He picked Lance up and put him in his arms. You're really light. Maybe you should eat more. Humans are supposed to be light. The champion was, after all, and he was in peak condition, Hagar mumbled. Lance tried his best to struggle out of Lotor's grasp, but he couldn't move an inch. He gave up on that and decided to do the next best thing. Fuck you guys! Once my team finds me, you 2 are so dead! Lotor and Hagar both laughed. Silly Paladin. They won't be able to find the ship even if they search entire galaxies. I will make sure of that, Hagar threatened. Lance did his best to glare at them as he was carried out blue, continuing to cuss them out. To say that Heath and Shiro were pissed would be an understatement. Once the Galra were finally starting to retreat, everyone was cheering until they noticed something was missing. Lance. They called out to him and looked around, yet he was nowhere to be found. The 2 alphas had landed their lions, then stormed to Allura and Cran, demanding to know where Lance was. When the 2 Altaians couldn't track him or Blue, chaos ensued. Hunk and Pidge had walked in to see Shiro and Keith in a rage. Keith, everyone could predict. He wasn't the best at controlling his instincts or emotions. Shiro, though, he was usually the calm and collected one, the one who thought things through. He was in a rage just like Keith, though. If that asshole thinks that we'll just let him get away with taking our lands, well, I have news for him. As soon as I see him, I'm going to rip his throat out, Keith yelled. Shiro was silent but was radiating rage. Cran. Pidge. I want Lance found. Now. Pidge and Cran followed the Alpha's orders, too scared to resist. They both hopped on their computers and started typing away. Laura took a deep breath, then hesitantly approached the 2 fuming Alphas. Hell, even she was scared of them at this point. Shiro? Keith? Might I suggest you go to the training room? We'll let you know if we find anything right away. What do you mean, if? Keith growled. Laura bit her lip, starting to sweat. I mean, when we find something. Shiro took a deep breath. He seemed to calm down slightly, but he was still tense, like he could pounce at any moment. Tell us as soon as you find him. He didn't say anything else, but there was an underlying threat in his words that everyone understood. With that, he dragged Keith with him to the training room. When the 2 Alphas left, everyone relaxed slightly. Hunk sighed. This place reeks of burnt cotton and pollution now. I can understand where they're coming from, though, Pidge spoke. Lance is their Omega. We didn't even notice him get taken. Plus, the whole Lotor liking Lance thing. Laura shook her head and sighed. We need to find Lance. The sooner the better. I'm concerned about not only his safety, but what Shiro and Keith might do. Don't worry, Princess. Number 5 and I will get this sorted out. Cran gave Laura a thumbs up, not looking away from the screen right in front of him. I sure hope so, Laura whispered, looking out one of the windows. Chapter 3. Lotor had taken Lance to an extravagant bedroom and left him on the bed. Lance was glad that he was alone for a little bit, but he still couldn't move. He was hoping he would be able to regain control of himself before Lotor came back, but it didn't look like that was going to happen. Instead, Lance was forced to stare up at the light purple canopy that covered the top of the bed. He tried casting his mind out to Blue, but it seemed she was still shut down. The Omega started thinking about the others and how they were doing. They had probably noticed that he was missing by now, right? Lance thought about how Shiro and Keith must be feeling right now. Knowing Heath, he was most likely going crazy. But Shiro? Lance had no clue how he was reacting right now. Probably cool and collected on the outside, but stressed out on the inside. Of course, that's how he always was. As soon as I can move, I'm punching Lotoad in the face, Lance promised himself. He sighed and closed his eyes, mentally preparing himself for whatever may happen. Lance hadn't even realized that he had fallen asleep till he woke up to feel someone stroking his hair. At first, he relaxed, thinking it was Shiro or Heath, until he caught the person's scent. Lilacs and moss. No one in his pack smelled like that. Lance's eyes shot open as he jerked up, turning to see Lotor sitting in bed next to him. The Galra prince smiled. "Hello, Lance. Nice to see you awake." Lance shuddered when he heard his name come from Lotor's mouth. He briefly glanced around to see he was still in the bedroom. This time he was able to see that there was a dresser with a mirror, a desk, a couch, a wardrobe, and what looked like a walk-in closet. He looked back at the Galra on the bed. "I would love for us to stay in this room and talk, but I promised the witch she could experiment a little on you as soon as you woke up." Lotor stood and stretched, then headed over to Lance. The blue paladin reached down to summon his Bayard, only to realize that he was only in his undersuit. Of course they would take his armor. Instead, he did the next best thing and got into a fighting stance. While he was definitely better at long range, Shiro and Heath had been teaching him hand-to-hand combat and how to defeat someone stronger than himself, especially an alpha, which Lotor was. Lotor chuckled. "Well, I find your fighting spirit cute. We don't have time for this." He charged forward faster than Lance expected, catching the blue paladin off guard. Lance barely had time to dodge as Lotor swept at his feet. Lotor reached forward and grabbed Lance's arm, then twisted it behind his back. Lance cried out in shock as he was pinned to one of the walls. Maybe when you're ready to be my mate, I'll teach you how to fight better," Lotor offhandedly commented as he held both of Lance's arms behind his back and started dragging him out of the room. "Quiznak you and your fighting skills," Lance yelled as he struggled in Lotor's grip. Lotor hissed. "Such language. Not very appropriate for a mega such as yourself." Lance shouted something in Spanish and managed to flip off the alpha. Lotor raised an eyebrow, pausing. "I have no clue what you just said, but I have a feeling it wasn't nice." Lance snorted. "You think?" Lotor sighed and ushered him forward. "Soon I will have your heart. It will take time, but I will have it." Lance's face scrunched up in disgust. "Good luck with that, Lotoad." Lotor chose to ignore that as he took Lance to a room with a table in the middle of it. He forced Lance down, getting some scratches and bite marks thanks to the feisty paladin, and strapped him down. He stood and smoothed out his clothes as Lance cursed and struggled. Lance was honestly terrified at this point. He had no clue what Hagar had in mind for him, but he knew it wouldn't be good. Was he going to get a limb replaced like Shiro? Multiple limbs? He sure hoped not. The door opened and Hagar stepped in. She went over to Lance and looked him over. "I would have preferred you taking his suit off." Lotor rolled his eyes. "You could have told me that before I took him here." He undid the top restraints and held Lance down as he started to take the paladin's suit off. Lance's eyes widened as he struggled against Lotor's grip. I think not! Let go of me!" "It's either this, or I cut it off," Lotor threatened. "How about neither?" Lance was starting to release a rotted fish and seaweed smell. Lotor scrunched up his nose and continued stripping Lance until he was just in his underwear. Lance tried to shrink up, filled with embarrassment and shame. He didn't want to be almost completely naked in front of the two of their biggest enemies. Hagar pulled out a potion from her robes and uncapped it. "Hold his mouth open." Lance clenched his jaw, not wanting to get even a drop of that in his mouth. Lotor grabbed Lance's mouth and forced it open with his gall restraint. Lance tried to move his head, but Lotor held him still as Hagar poured the potion into his mouth. Lance choked on the liquid and started coughing. Lotor released the Cuban boy when he was sure that he swallowed all of it. "What the hell did you just make me drink?" Hagar observed the boy's body, ignoring his question. Slowly, starting from his toes, Lance started glowing blue. "Did you just make me radioactive? Am I going to turn into a mutant?" Lance looked over himself the best he could. The glowing only lasted about half a minute before it stopped and Lance's skin turned back to normal. Interesting, Hagar mumbled. I'm going to need a blood test. Lotor, hold him still. While she went to get a needle, Lotor held Lance still yet again. I do not give consent to this? And how much blood are we talking? Humans need blood to survive, you know. Lance knew he was rambling, but he couldn't stop. It was his coping mechanism. Hagar approached him with a small needle and took some blood. She gave Lotor something to bandage Lance up while she went to the computer. Lance glared at Lotor as he bandaged his arm. Just so you know, I hate both of you. For now, you will learn to love me, Lotor replied as he finished. Hagar chuckled. Just as I thought. She pulled the results from the computer onto a big screen. Lance saw the outline of a human, and then a bunch of Galwa writing he didn't understand. An eighth of his body was colored in blue while the rest was purple. Lotor skimmed over the screen. This explains a lot. Hey, I know you guys like to be all mysterious and shit, but want to explain what's going on? Lance glanced between them, not expecting an answer, but brimming with curiosity. Lotor smirked at Lance. According to your blood results, you, Lance, are part Altean. Chapter 4. Paige yawned as she leaned back against Karan, still typing away at her computer. Have you found anything, Karan? She heard Karan sigh and slumped slightly. Negative. I tried tracing the blue line in every way I could think of, but nothing was working. They must be blocking the signal. Paige blinked as her vision went wonky, then focused him again. I'm trying to get a signal on his armor, but I'm getting the same thing as you. The door opened and both looked up to see Hunk entering with plates of food. You guys must be hungry. I don't think I've seen you two leave this room ever since Lance was taken. He set the plates down by the two exhausted tech geniuses. Paige gave him a grateful look and dug into the food. Karan sighed and nodded. We're both honestly too scared to leave the room in fear of Cheryl and Heath. It's not that we don't want to find Lance, because trust me, we do. But it's getting a little hard with those two breathing down our backs. Hug nodded. Yeah, I get that. Hey, since I delivered everyone's dinner, well, I left Heath and Cheryl outside the training room, I'll help you guys now. He sat down next to Paige and grabbed a different computer. Just so you know, we already tried tracking Lance's armor in the blue line. Right now I'm trying to see if I can track any Galring communications that mention Lance, Paige mentioned. I'll help you with that then. Hunk got comfy and started looking through communications. I'll continue to search for signals of the blue line, Cran said as he yawned. In the training room, Cheryl and Heath were sparring against each other, not going easy. They were both sweating and panting, but they continued. Cheryl made a grab at Heath and pinned him down, putting all his full body weight on the younger alpha. Heath panted in heavily as he looked up at Cheryl. Cheryl stared back at him, gasping for breath. They were both exhausted. Cheryl sighed and touched his forehead to Keith's. We should take a break. We need to get ready when the others find Lance. Heath glanced to the side. He shouldn't be missing in the first place. We should have been there for him. Cheryl nodded. I know, and once Lance gets back, we're going to make it up to him in whatever way we can. He stood and held out his hand for Keith. Keith grabbed Cheryl's hand and pulled himself up. Who knows what that bastard is up to, though? We should be out there looking for Lance instead of just hoping we can track him. Keith started pacing, getting more worked up. He was just radiating Bert Cotton. We can't lose him, Shiro. I can't lose him. He whirled around to face the other man. I can't lose another person I love. Shiro pulled Keith into a hug, stroking his hair. I know. We'll find him. He continued to hold Keith as his shirt was stained with tears. Lance paced around what was dubbed his and Lotor's bedroom. It had been what he thought was 3 days since Hagar had revealed his heritage. He still couldn't believe it. He was part of alien, and Altean at that? Lance stopped and glanced at the door. Lotor had left a few hours ago, saying he was going to attend a meeting. Honestly, the less of him he saw, the better Lance felt. The past few days had been weird with Lotor trying to court the Blue Paladin. Lotor would come in and shower him with gifts and praises, saying how beautiful and elegant he was, and trying to get him to wear dresses. Lance didn't really mind wearing dresses, but he did not feel comfortable wearing anything Lotor had given him. Luckily, the half-Gauren had enough decency to let Lance shower in peace, so he didn't smell that bad. Lance sighed as he sat down on the couch. He still wasn't able to contact with Blue, and his armor was kept far away from him. What I wouldn't do to talk with Shiro and Heath. The more he thought about his mates, the more his heart broke. He wanted to snuggle in Shiro and Keith's arms while they laid in his nest. He also wanted a nest. Lotor had tried to coax him into making one, but Lance's instincts were going crazy and he didn't feel safe enough to make one. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Lance looked up when the door opened and Lotor walked in. Hello, kitten. Another thing Lance hated was the nicknames Lotor called him. Lotor sat down next to the Cuban boy and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Those nubbles are insufferable. It takes a lot out of me not to snap at them. He looked at Lance. Enough of that. You get to leave the room today because I have a surprise for you, Lotor practically sang. Lance cringed away from Lotor. I don't want it. Lotor raised an amused eyebrow. Even if it's letting you talk to your teammates. Lance looked at Lotor with shocking confusion. What? Really? He didn't want to get his hopes up, but Lotor had yet to lie to him. Lotor chuckled. Yes, but you have to change your clothes. I'm not letting you leave here in that old suit. He stood his way over to the wardrobe and skimmed through it. Lance grimaced and watched as Lotor pulled out a blue crop top and skirt duo. The top had no sleeves, but two straps that came out the top to wrap around his neck. It was bedazzled in silver sequins. The skirt was most likely made out of silk that had a slit in the side. Lance hated to admit it, but Lotor knew how to pick clothes. I'll let you change in peace, Lotor said as he draped the clothes on the bed and headed to the door. Knock when you're done. Lance sighed when Lotor left and headed to the bed. He didn't want to dress in these clothes, not at all. He felt like he didn't have a choice, though, as he changed into the revealing outfit. He hid his suit under a pillow, then looked himself over in the mirror. Lance definitely looked good, but he didn't want his teammates seeing him wearing this, especially Keith and Shiro. The blue paladin went to the door and knocked on it, signaling he was done. Lotor opened the door and looked over him, smiling. Lance rolled his eyes. Take a picture, it'll last longer. Lotor smirked. I don't need to when I'll have you here for a long time. Lance stuck out his tongue. The others will find me. Maybe, maybe not. Lotor grabs Lance's hand and kissed it gently, before leading him away from the room. Lance's face twisted in disgust and he looked away from Lotor. At this point, he felt like he'd rather be tortured. Lotor led him in the same room as before, only there was a comfy-looking chair near the table. Lotor ushered Lance into the chair, and instead of leather straps, he handcuffed him with handcuffs that were chained to the floor. Lance figured he'd be able to move about halfway across the room before the change stopped him. All right, I'll give you about 10 minutes to talk to them before I come back, Lotor told Lance as he hit some buttons on a keyboard below the screen in front of Lance. Only 10 minutes, though. Karan yawned. He was honestly about to pass out. The ginger stood and stretched, hoping that moving around a little would help him stay awake longer. That's when the communication line started ringing. Pidge and Hunk looked up from where they were doing to watch as Karan answered it. Both of them jumped, though, when they saw who was on the screen. Lance! Karan immediately went to the speakers. Everyone, come to the bridge now! Lance is on screen! Hunk looked over Lance, making sure he wasn't injured. He was surprised to see the clothes Lance was wearing, and the fact that he looked unharmed. Lotor stepped into view, smirking. Hello, Paladins. Well, the two of you that are there. I'll be fair and set the timer once everyone arrives. Just as Pidge was going to ask what timer, the door burst open and two soaking wet and disheveled alphas ran in. Lance! They both yelled, seeing their man on screen. Keith! Shiro! Lance grinned, happy to see his mates. They looked ridiculous, but he didn't care. Alora finally ran in, the mice on her shoulders. Lance, you're all right! Lotor chuckled. Yes, I made sure that he's been well taken care of. He had an unfortunate cut when I took him out as a lion, but it's healed now. Keith and Shiro snarled at him. Give him back, Keith yelled. I'm going to say no. I will allow you to talk to him, though. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Lotor ran a hand down Lance's face and whispered in his ear, then walked away. Lance shuddered, but stood and moved closer to the screen. Guys, I'm so glad to see you. Heath and Cheryl moved past the others to get closer. Lance, are you all right? What has he done to you? Has he touched you? And what are you wearing? Pidge asked. Are they feeding you enough? Hunk asked. Heath sighed. I'm all right for the most part. Lotor hasn't touched me that much besides caressing my face and grabbing my arms. He keeps trying to sleep in the bed with me, but I kick him out so that he sleeps on the couch. He also kept trying to get me to wear different dresses and jewelry. The only reason I'm wearing this is because he wouldn't let me leave the bedroom until I wore it. Bedroom? Laura questioned. Yeah, he's making me stay in his bedroom. It's covered in purple. Lance groaned. Have you guys been able to find out where I am yet? I've mostly been kept in the bedroom besides when Hagar ran some tests on me. Cheryl went pale at the mention of Tess and Hagar. Did she hurt you at all? She's not planning on... As far as I can tell, they want to keep me intact. Although, I did find something out. Lance looked at Cora and then Laura. What is it? Coran asked. Lance sucked in his breath. I couldn't really read the screen because it was in Galvin, but Lotor told me what it said. Lance suddenly looked to his side and cursed. Lance? Keith couldn't keep the panic out of his voice. The Paladins and Alteans paled when Hagar stepped into view. She wore a wicked smirk as she locked her gaze with Cheryl. Hello, champion. I thought you were a good test subject, but your May is even better. Don't you dare hurt him, Cheryl yelled. If you even lay a finger on him, I will rip out your throat. Cheryl wasn't usually like this, but he was terrified and panicking. He didn't know what he would do if Lance got hurt in the same way he did. Hagar cackled. There's a reason you're the champion. I'm surprised, though, that you did not find out this one's heritage, though. Lance paled and swallowed. He didn't know how Laura and Cram were going to react to the news. Lance's heritage? Pidge questioned. Lotor came into view of the screen and wrapped his arms around Lance, causing the latter to shudder. I was honestly surprised myself. I think it would be more fun to show you rather than tell you. Lotor pulled Lance back into the sea and held him there. Get your hands off him! Heath yelled. Lance was his. He would be tearing Lotor and Hagar to shreds if he were there. The two ignored the Paladins as Hagar moved closer to Lance. Putting her hands on each side of Lance's head, her hands started to spark with purple electricity. Lance! Hunk yelled, moving right next to the two alphas. Keith was growling while Cheryl watched with wide eyes. At first, Lance felt nothing, but then it felt like his ears were stretching painfully, and his cheeks started burning like they had been touched with hot metal. He bit his lip, but that didn't stop the whimpers of pain from escaping his mouth and the tears that formed in his eyes. His whole body felt like it was getting stretched and squeezed together. He barely heard his teammates crying out his name, trying to ask him what was happening. And, as soon as it had started, it was over. Lance was shaking and panting as he looked at his teammates, only to hear them gasp in shock. Lance's hair had turned mostly white except for some light brown highlights. His ears were longer and pointed, and finally he had blue marks under his eyes. Lance looked fully Altean. Chapter 5. Alora and Corinne stared in shock. There, right on screen, was another Altean. The others were stunned too. Lance was Altean? Lance? Hunk asked. Lance looked at them. He looked so tired, like all his energy was drained. Lotor chuckled and caressed the Omega's cheek. Yes, it turns out that he's part Altean. Interesting, isn't it? And Hagar here was able to bring out that part. Cheryl and Keith growled. Their senses were starting to take over, especially for the latter. Don't touch him! Get your filthy hands off of him and give him back, or else I will track you down and rip your head off! Keith yelled. Lance glanced aside, then smiled slightly at Keith. You're always so impulsive. I promise you guys I'll escape and find you guys. Hunk. Lance spoke something in Spanish. I love you guys. The transmission shut off. Pitch looked at Hunk. What did he say? Hunk thought. Something about 2 big stars and a rock field? A location! He was sending us a message about where they were! Cran exclaimed before running over to his computer. Hunk and Pidge went to help him, while Allura looked over at the other 2 paladins. Shara and Keith were in a corner, talking to each other. By the looks of it, they were fighting. Deciding that she didn't want to get in the middle of that, Allura instead went off to do some of her own research. After transmission cut off, Lotor grabbed Lance's face and forced the now Altane to look at him. What did you say? Lance grinned slightly. What are you talking about? Lotor glared at him. What did you say in that other language? His tone was sharp and held slight accusation. I told the Yellow Paladin to take care of my alphas till I escape. Because I'm going to escape. Lance smirked. It was a believable lie, and it was half true. Lotor stared at him before slowly releasing his face. It's time to go back to our room. He unchained Lance and pulled him up. Lance was worn out from the transformation, so he barely had the energy to walk, let alone fight against Lotor's strong grip. Lotor didn't say any word on the walk, and instead just pulled Lance into bed with him and held him close. Lance, who was out of energy, fell asleep. Chapter 6. Heath paced back and forth across his room, growling. Shiro sat on the bed, watching the smaller alpha. We need to go after him. Who knows what Lotor's doing to him right now? Keith turned and snarled at Shiro. Shiro shot him a glare that would make most people submit. His gaze was cold and his voice sharp. Cran, Pidge, and Hunk are looking for him right now. We will wait until they are done. Keith crossed the room in a second and pulled Shiro up by the collar of his shirt. Damn it, Shiro! We can't wait! Don't you care about Lance? What Lotor might be doing to him right now? Shiro snarled at Keith, something he had never done before. He grabbed Keith's shoulders and squeezed them tight. Of course I care about Lance. He's our mate, for fuck's sake. I want him back as much as you do, but for now, it seems like he's not being hurt, and we can't go around attacking every Galra base. What if we attack one they're near and they flee? We need to locate him, then we'll attack. Keith growled and looked away, crossing his arms. Fine, but as soon as we find him, we are attacking and getting Lance back. Shiro sighed and patted Keith's shoulder. Let's go get something to eat. We haven't eaten since that battle. Keith slowly nodded, and the 2 headed toward the kitchen. Lance awoke to the sound of gentle purring in his mind. He immediately knew it was Blue and smiled in relief. Blue was flooding him with images of concern and comfort. He sent back that he was all right, and for the most part, and filled her in on what she had missed. In return, Blue became furious, and Lance was sent an image of frustration at being trapped in anger at Hagar and Lotor. Speaking of the prince, Lotor pulled Lance close and mumbled in his ear. I'm glad you're awake. I have something planned for today. We're going to go out on a date. He caressed Lance's cheek. Lance shuddered. And if I say no? Lotor chuckled. Funny that you think you have a choice. Lotor sat up and stretched, then stood. Lance glanced at him. Maybe he could escape while they were outside. He could knock Lotor out or something. Maybe he could do it right now. Lance slowly got up and grabbed a lamp that was on the nightstand. Lotor was digging around in the wardrobe, trying to decide on what he would make Lance wear. Lance took a deep breath, calming breath, and then swung at Lotor's head. Lotor whipped around and grabbed Lance's hand. That's not very nice, dear. You make it so very hard to love you sometimes. But don't worry, I'll never stop. He pulled the lamp from Lance's hand and gave him a tight hug. Let me go, you creep! Lance yelled, wiggling around. His arms were pinned at his sides, but he could tell Lotor was having a hard time keeping them there. Calm down, dear. We're going to have a relaxing day. Lance felt a prick at his neck, and he looked to see a needle sticking out of his neck that had yellow liquid in it. What the... Jeez. He felt himself becoming numb and stopped moving. Lotor chuckled and pulled the needle out when it was empty. Don't worry. It's just something that will keep you calm and submissive for a while. It takes effect fast, I've noticed. Perfect for unruly omegas. Lance wanted to speak, but he couldn't. All that could get past his lips were weird noises. He cast his mind out to Blue, but the connection was becoming weaker with every passing second. Blue? Who was Blue? Lance didn't know anymore. I didn't want to resort to this, but you forced my hand. I love you, Lance, and I need you to be mine. Lotor gently stroked Lance's face, admiring the smoothness of it. Lance looked at Lotor. Who is this again? He said he loves him. Who are you? And why was his skin purple? Lotor chuckled. It's me, love. Your mate, Lotor. It was coming back to him now. He had 2 mates. Lance nodded. And who's our other mate? Lance had 2 mates, right? Lance could have sworn he had 2 alphas. There is no one else. It's just us and our love. Lotor kissed Lance's cheek. Lance blinked. Oh yeah, he only had 1 mate, and that was Lotor. His alpha. And they were in their bedroom. He smiled and kissed Lotor's cheek. I love you. Lotor grinned. I love you too. Now, let's get ready for our date. Lance hummed to himself as he sat behind Lotor, braiding the latter's hair. They were currently sitting on a blanket and were surrounded by fields of rock, only interrupted by the Galva ship and a purple lake. Lance still felt cloudy, and he had a hard time remembering things. Like, for example, how he met his mate. He remembered something about a battle, but that was it. Honey, can you remind me how we met? Lotor nodded slightly. You and I met in battle. Both our species were coming together to fight Voltron, and their traitorous leader, Allura. She herself was the same race as you, Altean. She was actually the princess of Altea, but she wanted more. She and her army tried to conquer the galaxy. Allura has 4 generals, the green, yellow, red, and black Paladins. I saved you from the black and red Paladins when they tried to attack you, and we've been attached ever since. Unfortunately, even with my army and the others trying to help, Altea was destroyed. You are one of the only survivors, the other being Allura and her advisor Koran. Lance felt nauseated. How could he have forgotten that? The destruction of his civilization? They were going to pay, especially Allura, Shiro, and Heath. Lance froze. Shiro and Heath? Who were they? Lance shook those thoughts away when he was pulled into Lotor's arms. It's okay, my love. We are still working to beat them, and we will soon. Plus, you are not completely alone. My mother was Altean while my father was Galrin. I'm half Altean. Lance looked up as Lotor and smiled. At least he had his amazing mate. He pulled Lotor in for a kiss. Chapter 7. Allura groaned and slammed the book that she was reading shut. From what she had heard, Earth had been for the most part untouched by other aliens. So how was it that Lance was part Altean? She sighed and grabbed another book. The cover and binding worn to the point that the words on front were unreadable. Allura took her chances and opened the book, ready for disappointment. Her eyes widened, though, when she read the first paragraph. It is time to begin my journey. My brother, Alfor, and our parents were against it. But I need to leave. I'm going to explore the galaxy and record my findings in this and other journals. I miss Altea already, but I know that I will stop by occasionally. Of course, with this, I forfeit the crown, but Alfor has always shown more potential than me. This was her uncle's journal. Allura had heard about how he had explored the galaxy, but never got the chance to meet him before Zarkon turned and betrayed everyone. She continued reading. I plan on sending copies of my journals to the castle whenever I finish some, to share what I have learned. I know Alfor will enjoy them. It's time to head out on my ship. I will write once again once I see something spectacular. Allura got comfortable, knowing she would be reading for a while. Shiro rolled his shoulder, trying to ignore the aching that caused by his prosthetic. He and Heath had been sleeping well, and that was starting to take a toll on them. With their omega missing, and lack of sleep, and all the stress, they were constantly snapping at everyone, including each other. He leaned back against the window, glancing at Heath. He was glad Heath was able to fall asleep. So, when Alora started shouting over the speaker for everyone to meet in the kitchen, he was not in the best mood. He practically radiated irritation as he and Heath entered the kitchen. He noticed everyone was already there, and they stiffened when they caught sight of him and Heath. "What's going on? Is there an update on Lance?" Heath asked, leaning against Cheryl. Laura glanced between the alphas and betas, seeming to calm down and compose herself. "Yes and no. We have narrowed down the places Lance could be, and we are pretty sure he's on a planet. Along with that, I have found out about Lance's heritage, and I know who his great-grandfather is." Cheryl raised an eyebrow. He was glad they narrowed down Lance's location, and it was interesting that Alora figured out something about Lance's heritage, but, well, if you narrowed it down some, can't you narrow it down more right now? "Lance's heritage can wait," Keith yelled, glaring at everyone. Paige growled, not something she did often. "Hey, we've been working non-stop for several days, and we did work that should have taken weeks and hours. We need a break, or else we won't be able to help Lance at all when we do find him." Keith was going to respond, but Cheryl grabbed his shoulder. "We could all use a short break, I suppose. We can eat while Laura goes over what she found." Keith looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't say anything. Laura sighed in relief, and everyone slowly sat down except for Hunk. He started cooking what would be lunch. "So, it started when I found one of my uncle's journals. He was an explorer and rarely visited. He did send journals about his experience back to the castle, however. One tells how he didn't get the news about what happened to my father until it was too late. In response, he traveled to a planet where he thought time moved faster for him and than most of the universe, so he could grieve. He got it wrong, though. Time moved much slower for him while the universe moved faster around him. By the time he left the planet, almost 10,000 years had passed. 9,859 to be precise. Alora looked up to see if everyone was still paying attention. They were. "Keep in mind, Altaians live longer than you humans." So, seeing that he had made a mistake, he traveled to see what had changed. He came across a planet with blue oceans and green land, with creatures that were similar to him, but had no markings and had ugly ears. "Earth," Pidge whispered. "Wait, Laura, you're saying that your uncle is?" Everyone was on the edge of their seats, confused and surprised by the news. Laura nodded. "He met a human woman with dark skin and deep blue eyes. He instantly fell for her, and together they had several children. After that, there are no more entries I could find. I believe that based off all the evidence..." "Lance is your cousin!" Hug yelled out. "First cousin twice removed, to be exact," Pitch corrected. "This is fascinating." Cheryl and Keith shared a look, then Keith muttered, "Lance was pining after his own cousin when we first came here." The humans shared a look, and for the first time in a while, they laughed. Chapter 8. Lance laid on the couch, staring up at the ceiling. He's been so confused and conflicted lately. First of all, his memories were all messed up, and he was constantly had to ask Lotor questions, which luckily the half-Galran didn't mind. Second, he constantly felt a presence in the back of his head that had been pushing against. Lance was too nervous to bring this up to his mate, not wanting to add more to his plate. It still concerned him, though. Third, why did he know the Red and Black Paladins' names when he was never told them? The best he could come up with is that he had heard their names in the past during the war. The presence was there again, pushing at his mind, trying to get in. "Go away," Lance thought. It was worth a try in his opinion. The presence persisted, pushing harder than before. Lance growled and rolled to his side. Out of ideas, Lance stopped pushing and let the presence in. It couldn't be that bad, right? Immediately, he was flooded with images of relief and something else. Something motherly. He got an image of a lion, a blue one. It was trapped in the ship, calling out for him, beckoning him to come. Lance didn't even realize that he had gotten up till he bumped into Lotor at the door. "Lance, where are you going?" Lotor asked, gently grabbing Lance's arms. Lance blinked and shook his head, then looked at Lotor. I don't know. There's something in mind. Something telling me to go to it. A blue lion?" Lotor furrowed his brows. "Is that so? Give me a minute, then I'll go with you. All right?" Lance nodded and kissed Lotor's cheek. "Thank you." Lotor smiled and stepped back out of the room. Lance decided to change into different clothes while he waited and went over to his wardrobe. He pulled out a simple light blue dress with off-the-shoulder sleeves that went a little past his knees. Lance glanced at the door and bit his lip. He tentatively reached out with his mind, trying to communicate to the presence again. It was there, waiting for him. "Who are you?" he asked. It responded with an image of a blue lion that joined with other lions to form a giant robot. It also sent images of people in outfits that Lance knew were the Paladins, with himself standing by them. Lance furrowed his eyebrows. "What? But why would I be with the Paladins?" Before the lion sent any other pictures, Lotor entered the room. "Lance, I'm ready to go with you." Lance looked at Lotor in concern. "The lion sent me an image of me, standing with the Paladins. Why would it do that?" Lotor bit his lip and seemed to think before answering. "Lance, there's something I haven't told you yet because I didn't want you to panic. Before Laura turned on Altea, she kept the peace with her generals, the Paladins. There were 5. Black, red, yellow, green, and blue. You were the blue Paladin. You left, though, when you saw that Laura was becoming corrupted, taking the blue line with you so they couldn't form their ultimate weapon, Voltron." Lance stared at Lotor in disbelief. "I was the blue Paladin?" Lotor nodded. Lance looked down, processing the information. "But I left. I left so they couldn't form Voltron. That's good, right? I didn't do anything bad, right?" Lotor looked away. "You enslaved a few planets before you realized what you were doing was wrong. But you never killed anyone." He looked back at Lance. "You've done lots of good since then, though. You fight against Allura and her Paladins." Lance looked at Lotor, this time with a fire in his eyes. "I want to continue fighting them till the universe can live in peace. I'll do whatever it takes." Lotor smiled. "Of course." Cran jumped up. "I found it!" Everyone stopped what they were doing to look at Cran. "You found where Lance is?" Heath asked. Cran nodded and pulled up a projection of the screen. "Planet Hera. It sits between 2 stars and has a surface of mostly rocky plains with the occasional lake and a small patch of forest. It's been deserted for a long time, a perfect place to hide." Shiro and Keith hurried over to the projection and studied the planet. It was small, and exactly like Corinne said. "When do we leave?" Pitch asked. "Now," Keith growled out. So, yeah, that was chapters 1 through 8 of my, that was chapters 1 through 8 of my fanfic, My True Self. It's named My True Self because Lance's true self is part Altean. So, yeah. As you can see, there's a chapter 9, but that's in progress. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll probably finish this fic soon and then read the rest of it next Monday. But, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day or night. Fergus out.